6 types of women you should never trust. Machiavelli warned you. You've been conditioned to trust without question, to believe that vulnerability is strength, that openness is virtue. But tonight, as you lie awake replaying conversations that left you hollow, you begin to sense the truth Machiavelli whispered centuries ago. The very traits society taught you to admire in others may be the weapons they use to dismantle your soul. This isn't about hatred. This is about survival. There's a tremor in your chest when you recall her words, the way she spoke with such conviction about loyalty, while her eyes calculated your weaknesses. You gave her access to your inner world because you believed sincerity was reflected in sincerity, that trust was a mutual exchange. But what if you've been playing by rules that only apply to you? What if your greatest strengths have become the very tools used to exploit you? The sleepless hours stretch before you, and in the darkness, uncomfortable questions begin to surface. How many times have you ignored the dissonance between someone's words and their actions? How often have you rationalized behavior that your instincts screamed was wrong? You've been taught that doubt is cynicism, that questioning motives is paranoia, that setting boundaries is selfishness. But what if these teachings were designed to keep you compliant, accessible, and ultimately defenseless? Tonight, you're confronting the possibility that your compassion has been weaponized against you, that your desire to see the good in others has blinded you to the calculated nature of their approach. The women who have caused you the deepest pain didn't accidentally stumble into your life. They identified you as a target, recognized your patterns, and systematically exploited your emotional architecture. This realization doesn't make you bitter. It makes you awake. For the first time, you're seeing the game that's been played around you, the strategies that have been employed against you, the psychological warfare you never knew you were fighting. You're beginning to understand that some people don't experience love the way you do, don't feel guilt the way you do, don't operate from the same moral framework that governs your decisions. The women who have devastated you aren't broken, they're strategic. They haven't been unconsciously harmful. They've been deliberately calculating. And you haven't been unlucky in love. You've been selected for qualities that make you an ideal victim. Your empathy, your loyalty, your willingness to sacrifice, these aren't character flaws. But they become vulnerabilities when encountered by those who view relationships as conquest rather than connection. You thought goodness was universal, that the warmth in her eyes reflected the purity of her intentions. But as you dissect the moments when trust became betrayal, you realize that innocence itself can be performed, crafted, weaponized. The most dangerous predators wear the mask of virtue, and you've been feeding them intelligence about your weaknesses, while believing you were building intimacy. Your naivety has become their greatest asset. Remember how she looked when she first shared her story, the slight tremor in her voice, the way she avoided eye contact just long enough to seem vulnerable, the perfectly timed pause before revealing her deepest wound. You felt chosen, special, trusted, with something sacred. But now you understand that vulnerability can be rehearsed, that tears can be summoned on command, that intimacy can be manufactured by those who have studied its components without ever feeling its truth. She knew exactly which buttons to press, because she had been watching you, learning your patterns, mapping your emotional responses. The way you rushed to comfort her wasn't kindness, it was programming. She had identified your savior complex and activated it with surgical precision. Your desire to heal became her opportunity to infiltrate. You gave her your trust because her performance was flawless, because she had perfected the art of appearing genuine while remaining completely calculated. She spoke the language of wounded innocence fluently because she had practiced it on others before you. You weren't her first victim. You were simply the latest in a long line of men who mistook manipulation for authenticity. The most chilling realization is how naturally it all felt. The way she seemed to understand you, the way conversations flowed, the way she appeared to need exactly what you were eager to provide. This wasn't coincidence, it was engineering. She had constructed a personality specifically designed to resonate with your psychological frequency, creating a false sense of compatibility that would lower your defenses and increase your investment. Your genuine emotions became her raw material. She harvested your empathy, processed your compassion, and returned it to you as something that felt like love but was actually entrapment. You were experiencing authentic feelings for an inauthentic person, pouring real love into a carefully constructed illusion. She arrives in your life wearing her wounds like jewelry, each sob story precisely calibrated to trigger your protective instincts. You become her emotional physician, her financial sanctuary, her psychological crutch. And slowly you realize you're not healing her, you're being drained. The victim who never heals is not broken. She is a strategist who has discovered that weakness is her ultimate power, and your compassion is the currency she extracts without ever intending to reciprocate. This woman has transformed suffering into an art form, victimhood into a profession. She doesn't seek healing, she seeks suppliers. Her pain isn't genuine trauma. It's carefully maintained inventory, ready to be deployed whenever your attention wanes or your resources become less accessible. She has weaponized your masculine instinct to protect and provide, turning your strength into her sustenance. Notice how her crises always coincide with your moments of independence. When you begin to focus on your own goals, suddenly her world is falling apart and she needs you to rescue her. When you start to question the relationship's balance, she reveals new depths of trauma that require your immediate attention. Her emergencies aren't random, they're strategic, designed to redirect your energy back toward her whenever you begin to reclaim it for yourself. She has studied the psychology of codependency and positioned herself as the perfect recipient of your caretaking impulses. Your desire to be needed becomes her guarantee of control. She ensures you never feel successful in helping her, because a solved problem is a useless problem. Her recovery would mean your dismissal, so she maintains just enough crisis to keep you engaged, while never progressing enough to graduate from your care. The most insidious aspect of this dynamic is how virtuous it makes you feel. You believe you're being noble, loyal, compassionate, demonstrating the highest qualities of masculine devotion. But you're actually being farmed, cultivated like a resource to be harvested when convenient. Your noble intentions are being used to justify your exploitation. She has created a psychological trap where your own moral standards become the bars of your prison. To abandon her would violate your sense of honor. To stop helping would contradict your values. To demand reciprocity would reveal your selfishness. She has engineered a scenario where your integrity becomes the mechanism of your entrapment. You find yourself making excuses for her behavior, explaining away red flags, rationalizing patterns that would be unacceptable from anyone else. You've become complicit in your own manipulation, defending the very person who is systematically destroying your peace of mind and financial stability. Watch how perfectly she mirrors your interests, your values, your dreams, too perfectly. The woman who becomes whoever you need her to be has no authentic self to offer, only an endless performance designed to penetrate your defenses. You find yourself falling in love with your own reflection, never realizing that beneath her adaptability lies a void that will consume your identity. She doesn't love you, she studies you, learning your patterns to predict and control your responses. This is the most seductive form of deception because it feels like perfect compatibility. She likes everything you like, shares your perspectives, dreams your dreams. But this isn't synchronicity, it's research. She has become a psychological mirror, reflecting back to you an idealized version of partnership that exists only in your interactions with her. The speed at which she adapts should terrify you. One day she's passionate about your hobby, the next she's absorbed your political views, within a week she's speaking your language and sharing your aspirations. Normal people have established personalities, fixed preferences, consistent worldviews. She has none of these because she is whatever the moment requires her to be. You mistake this flexibility for evolution, believing you're watching her grow and discover herself through your influence. But she isn't developing, she's performing. Each new interest she adopts, each value she suddenly shares, each goal she claims to pursue, is simply another layer of camouflage designed to make you believe you found your soulmate. The tragedy is that you fall in love with yourself, with your own reflection distorted through her performance. She becomes the person you always wanted to meet, which means you never actually meet her at all. The relationship exists entirely within your imagination, built on foundations of carefully constructed illusion. She has no authentic preferences to offer because she has learned that authentic preferences create conflict, disagreement, friction. By becoming whatever you want, she eliminates obstacles to intimacy while ensuring she remains indispensable to your happiness. You can't leave her because she has become exactly what you thought you needed. But this perfection comes at a cost. Gradually, you begin to lose touch with your own authentic self as you become accustomed to seeing yourself reflected everywhere. Your individual identity starts to blur as her performance becomes more sophisticated and encompassing. You stop growing because growth requires challenge, and she has eliminated all challenge by agreeing with everything you are. She collects your vulnerabilities like trophies, encouraging you to share deeper, reveal more, trust completely. But notice how little she offers in return, how skillfully she deflects when conversations turn toward her own shadows. The woman who knows everything about you while remaining a mystery is building an arsenal of intimate weapons. Your secrets become her leverage, your confessions become her insurance policy against your potential departure or defiance. This woman has mastered the psychology of extraction. She creates an atmosphere of intimacy and trust that encourages you to reveal your deepest insecurities, your shameful memories, your hidden fears. She positions herself as your confessor, your therapist, your closest confidant. But while you're sharing your soul, she's cataloging weaknesses. Every secret you tell her becomes a tool she can use against you later. Your childhood trauma becomes ammunition for manipulation. Your professional insecurities become pressure points she can activate when she needs compliance. Your relationship history becomes a map of your patterns that she uses to predict and control your behavior. She encourages this disclosure by creating false reciprocity, sharing calculated vulnerabilities that appear authentic but reveal nothing truly compromising about her. She tells you stories that generate sympathy without providing leverage, confessions that seem intimate but maintain her strategic advantage. You believe you're both opening up equally, but the exchange is entirely one-sided. The imbalance becomes apparent only in retrospect. When you try to recall what you actually know about her inner world, you realize you know almost nothing. Her past remains vague, her family dynamics unclear, her previous relationships mysterious. She has kept herself opaque while rendering you transparent. This information asymmetry becomes a source of power. In any conflict, she knows exactly which insecurities to target, which fears to activate, which guilt to trigger. She has studied your psychological landscape so thoroughly that she can navigate your emotional responses with frightening precision. You find yourself constantly surprised by her moves while she remains steps ahead of yours. Your vulnerability becomes her weapon, your trust becomes her strategic advantage. The very openness that was supposed to create intimacy has instead created a fundamental power imbalance where she holds all the cards and you've revealed your entire hand. Her moods control the temperature of every room. Her emotions dictate the rhythm of your existence. You find yourself walking on eggshells, constantly calculating whether your words might trigger her next emotional explosion. This isn't sensitivity, it's manipulation through instability. She has discovered that unpredictable emotional reactions can train you to self-censor, to shrink, to prioritize her comfort over your own authenticity. You become her emotional hostage, and she holds the key to your peace. This woman has weaponized her emotional volatility, transforming mood swings into instruments of control. Her reactions are so disproportionate, so unpredictable, so intense, that you begin modifying your behavior to avoid triggering them. You start editing your words, suppressing your opinions, hiding your feelings, all in service of maintaining her emotional stability. But her instability isn't a disorder. It's a strategy. She has learned that emotional chaos creates compliance, that unpredictable reactions generate careful responses. When people can't predict what will set you off, they begin walking on eggshells around you, censoring themselves to avoid conflict. This gives you tremendous power over their behavior and expression. Notice how her explosions always seem to occur when you're asserting independence, expressing dissent, or pursuing something that doesn't center her needs. Her emotional breakdowns coincidentally align with your moments of autonomy, creating a pattern where your freedom becomes associated with her suffering. You learn to avoid independence because it triggers her instability. She has trained you like a laboratory rat, using intermittent reinforcement to shape your behavior. Sometimes your actions produce calm, sometimes they produce chaos, and this unpredictability creates an addiction to her approval. You become obsessed with finding the formula that will keep her stable, not realizing that the formula changes constantly because the goal isn't stability, it's control. Your own emotional needs become secondary to managing hers. You stop having authentic reactions because you're too busy calculating her potential responses. Your spontaneity dies because spontaneity carries the risk of triggering her volatility. You become a prisoner of her emotional terrorism, and she becomes the warden of your authentic self. The most insidious aspect is how she makes you feel responsible for her emotional state. When she explodes, it's because of something you did or didn't do. When she's calm, it's because you finally behaved correctly. You become addicted to being the cause of her peace, never realizing that her chaos is manufactured to create this very dependency. Watch how she isolates you from your allies, how subtly she plants seeds of doubt about those who truly care for you. The woman who systematically dismantles your support network while positioning herself as your only true friend is not protecting you. She's ensuring your dependence. She needs you weak, alone, and grateful for her presence. Your friends become threats to her control, so she eliminates them through carefully orchestrated character assassinations and manufactured conflicts. This isolation doesn't happen overnight. It begins with subtle observations about your friends' behavior, minor criticisms disguised as concern, gentle suggestions that perhaps certain people don't have your best interests at heart. She plants seeds of doubt so carefully that you begin to question relationships that have been stable for years. She has studied the dynamics of your social circle and identified the threats to her influence. The friend who sees through her performance, the family member who questions her motives, the colleague who encourages your independence, these people must be neutralized. She develops targeted strategies for each relationship, customizing her approach to maximize damage while maintaining plausible deniability. Her method is character assassination through manufactured conflict. She creates situations where your friends are forced to choose sides, then positions herself as the victim of their unreasonable behavior. She provokes them into reactions that she can later use as evidence of their true nature. She orchestrates scenarios where your loyalty is tested, making it impossible to maintain both relationships. Gradually, you find yourself defending her against people who have never given you reason to doubt their intentions. You're explaining away behavior that would be unacceptable from anyone else, making excuses for actions that violate your own values. She has made you complicit in the destruction of your own support system. The most devastating aspect is how natural it feels. Each relationship that ends seems to have its own justification, its own logical reason for failure. You don't realize you're watching a coordinated campaign until you're completely isolated, dependent on her for all emotional support, social interaction, and validation. By then, she has become your entire world, and the thought of losing her feels like social death. Your isolation becomes her insurance policy. Without alternative perspectives, you can't gauge the toxicity of your situation. Without other relationships to compare against, her behavior seems normal. Without allies to support you, leaving becomes unthinkable. She has created a closed system where she is both the problem and the only solution. She speaks fluently in futures that never arrive, painting visions of tomorrow that justify today's sacrifices. The woman who lives in promises while avoiding present commitments is selling you dreams to purchase your current devotion. Notice how her grand plans always require your investment, your time, your resources, your faith, while her contributions remain perpetually postponed. She trades in hope like a currency, and you're paying premium prices for fantasies. This woman has mastered the art of temporal manipulation, using your hopes for the future to control your present behavior. She speaks constantly about what you'll do together, where you'll go, what you'll build. But these visions always exist in some undefined tomorrow that never quite arrives. She keeps you invested in potentiality while delivering nothing concrete. Her promises are specifically designed to address your deepest desires. She has studied what you want most and created elaborate fantasies around providing it. The business. You'll start together, the family you'll build, the adventures you'll share. Each promise is calibrated to maintain your emotional investment while requiring your immediate sacrifice. Notice the pattern. Her commitments are always conditional, delayed, or dependent on circumstances beyond her control. She'll move in with you after she settles some family drama. She'll commit to your relationship after she finishes her current project. She'll invest in your shared future after she resolves her financial situation. There's always an obstacle preventing her from delivering on her promises, always a reason why today's sacrifice is necessary for tomorrow's reward. She has weaponized your ability to delay gratification, turning your patience into a tool for her exploitation. You become willing to endure present dysfunction for promised future fulfillment. You accept today's inadequacy as investment in tomorrow's abundance. But the future she describes never materializes because it was never intended to materialize. It exists only to justify present exploitation. Your investment becomes a sunk cost that grows larger with each passing day. You've already sacrificed so much for these shared dreams that abandoning them feels like admitting total failure. She counts on this psychological trap, knowing that the more you invest in her promises, the harder it becomes to acknowledge they were never real. The cruelest aspect is how she adjusts the timeline whenever you begin to demand fulfillment. When you ask about the business you're supposed to start, suddenly there's a new obstacle that requires more time. When you mention the commitment she promised, she reveals new complications that delay her ability to deliver. She's always just about to fulfill her promises, which means she never actually has to fulfill them. Machiavelli understood that the greatest danger comes not from obvious enemies, but from those who wear the mask of alliance while serving their own interests. These 6 archetypes represent timeless patterns of manipulation that transcend gender, culture, and era. The woman who embodies these traits has studied the art of psychological warfare, and she practices it with the precision of a master strategist. Your recognition of these patterns is not cynicism, it's wisdom. Throughout The Prince, Machiavelli warned about the danger of believing others operate from the same moral framework that governs your own decisions. He understood that power seekers study the psychology of their targets, identifying weaknesses and exploiting them with calculated precision. What he observed in political warfare, you are experiencing in intimate relationships. These women have internalized Machiavellian principles without studying Machiavelli. They understand instinctively that power comes from information asymmetry, that control requires dependency, that influence demands the systematic dismantling of their target's psychological defenses. They practice psychological warfare not because they're evil, but because they've learned it works. Each archetype represents a different strategy for achieving the same goal, your complete psychological submission. The victim drains your resources, the chameleon erases your identity, the secret keeper builds leverage, the terrorist controls your behavior, the isolator removes your support, and the promise maker keeps you invested in illusion. Different tactics, identical objective. You're beginning to understand that your capacity for love has been used against you, that your moral principles have become the mechanism of your exploitation. The women who have caused you the most damage haven't been randomly cruel. They've been strategically manipulative. They identified you as someone who could be controlled through emotional means and developed customized approaches to achieve that control. This recognition doesn't make you paranoid. It makes you prepared. You're not developing hatred for women. You're developing discernment about manipulation. You're not becoming closed to love. You're becoming resistant to exploitation. You're not hardening your heart. You're strengthening your boundaries. The patterns you've identified are not accidents or coincidences. They're the predictable behaviors of individuals who view relationships as conquest rather than connection, who see your empathy as weakness rather than strength, who interpret your loyalty as exploitable rather than admirable. Understanding these patterns allows you to recognize them early and respond appropriately. Your previous experiences were not failures, they were education. Each manipulation attempt has taught you something valuable about human psychology, about your own vulnerabilities, about the strategies that work against you. This knowledge transforms you from victim to strategist, from target to analyst, from wounded to wise. As you integrate these revelations, feel the weight of false obligations lifting from your shoulders. You are not required to be everyone's savior, emotional support system, or source of validation. The detachment you're cultivating is not coldness, it's sovereignty. You're learning to observe without absorbing, to care without sacrificing, to love without losing yourself. This transformation may feel like betrayal to those who profited from your previous vulnerability, but their discomfort confirms your evolution. This is the moment of liberation, when you realize that most of your emotional burdens were never actually yours to carry. The guilt you've carried for not doing enough, not being enough, not giving enough, this guilt was installed by those who benefited from your self-doubt. You are not responsible for other people's emotional regulation, financial stability, or life satisfaction. The boundaries you're developing are not walls, they're filters. They allow genuine connection while blocking manipulation, permit authentic intimacy while preventing exploitation. You're not becoming unavailable, you're becoming selective. You're not closing your heart, you're protecting it from those who would weaponize it against you. Notice how peaceful it feels to release yourself from obligations that were never really obligations at all. The pressure to fix others, to rescue them from consequences of their own choices, to provide endless emotional support without reciprocation, this pressure was artificially created by those who needed you to feel responsible for their well-being. Your detachment is not apathy, it's discernment. You're learning to distinguish between genuine need and manufactured crisis, between authentic vulnerability and performed weakness, between real love and strategic manipulation. This skill will transform every relationship in your life, allowing you to invest your energy where it will be appreciated rather than exploited. The people who respond negatively to your new boundaries are revealing their true intentions. Those who genuinely care about you will respect your need for balance and reciprocity. Those who resist your boundaries were never interested in mutual relationship. They were interested in what they could extract from you. You're discovering that love without boundaries isn't love at all. It's enablement, codependency, self-destruction, disguised as virtue. True love requires mutual respect, and respect is impossible without boundaries. The relationships that survive your transformation will be healthier, more balanced, more authentic than anything you've experienced before. Your evolution is threatening to those who profited from your previous pattern of self-sacrifice. They will attempt to guilt you back into your old role, to convince you that your growth is actually regression, that your strength is actually selfishness. But their desperation to maintain the old dynamic proves how necessary your transformation really is. Your newfound awareness changes everything without announcing itself. You stop offering explanations for boundaries you shouldn't have to defend. You withdraw your energy from relationships that demanded everything while offering nothing. The women who once relied on your predictable responses now face the unsettling reality of your transformed presence. Your silence becomes more powerful than your previous words. Your absence more impactful than your former availability. This is the power of strategic silence, the strength found in withdrawal. You no longer feel compelled to explain yourself. To those who have demonstrated, they don't respect your explanations. You don't justify your boundaries to people who have consistently violated them. You don't negotiate with individuals who have proven they're not operating in good faith. Your silence is not passive-aggressive, it's strategically decisive. You have learned that some people interpret explanation as negotiation, justification as weakness, patience as permission to continue harmful behavior. With these individuals, silence communicates more effectively than words ever could. The women who once controlled you through emotional manipulation now face the bewildering reality of your emotional independence. They can no longer predict your responses because you're no longer responding from the same psychological pattern. They attempt to trigger your old reactions but discover that their buttons no longer work. Your absence creates a vacuum that forces them to confront their own behavior. When you stop rescuing, they must face the consequences of their choices. When you stop explaining, they must examine their own actions. When you stop providing emotional support, they must develop their own emotional regulation skills. This withdrawal is not punishment. It's natural consequence. You are no longer available to be used as a resource for those who refuse to reciprocate. You no longer provide energy to relationships that consistently drain you. You no longer accept responsibility for other people's emotional states. The power shift is subtle but profound. You are no longer reactive. You are responsive. You no longer operate from desperation. You choose from abundance. You no longer need their approval because you have developed your own internal validation system. This transformation is terrifying to those who relied on your need for their acceptance. Your new pattern of behavior is unpredictable to those who had memorized your old patterns. They don't know how to manipulate someone who doesn't need their validation, doesn't fear their abandonment, doesn't accept their blame. You have become psychologically sovereign, and sovereignty cannot be controlled through conventional manipulation tactics. You swear allegiance to no one but your own discernment, your own peace, your own authentic path. The truths you've uncovered cannot be unlearned, and the strength you've reclaimed cannot be surrendered. You walk forward with the quiet confidence of someone who has seen through society's most seductive illusions and chosen wisdom over comfort. This is not the end of your capacity for connection. It's the beginning of relationships built on truth rather than manipulation. This final transformation is not isolation. It's liberation. You're not closing yourself off from love. You are opening yourself to authentic love by closing yourself off to counterfeit intimacy. You are not becoming cold. You are becoming discerning. You are not choosing loneliness. You are choosing solitude over exploitation. Your allegiance to your own discernment means you trust your instincts over social expectations, your experience over others' words, your peace over their comfort. You have learned to distinguish between genuine intuition and paranoid projection, between healthy skepticism and destructive cynicism. The path forward requires this kind of sovereignty, not independence from all human connection, but independence from unhealthy human connection. You are available for relationships that honor your authenticity, respect your boundaries, and contribute to your growth. You are unavailable for relationships that require you to diminish yourself for others' comfort. Your transformation is complete. Not when you stop feeling, but when you stop feeling obligated to manage others' feelings. Not when you stop caring, but when you stop caring more about their opinion than your own peace. Not when you stop loving, but when you stop accepting manipulation disguised as love. The women who will enter your life from this point forward will encounter a different version of you, one who has learned the difference between strength and availability, between compassion and enabling, between love and codependency. They will find a man who can be vulnerable without being exploitable, generous without being naive, loving without being desperate. This is your rebirth into psychological adulthood, where relationships become choices rather than compulsions, where boundaries become expressions of self-respect rather than barriers to intimacy, where your love becomes a gift rather than a guarantee. You are no longer seeking completion through others because you have learned to complete yourself. The journey that began with painful recognition of manipulation patterns has ended with the peaceful recognition of your own sovereign power. You needed to understand how you had been controlled in order to reclaim control over your own life. You needed to see the games others played in order to stop playing those games yourself. You walk forward into a future where your relationships will be chosen rather than endured, where your love will be appreciated rather than exploited, where your strength will be honored rather than weaponized against you. This is not the end of your story, it is the beginning of the chapter where you finally become the author. Description: she doesn't love you, she studies you. You thought you were building a connection. What you were actually doing was being studied, dissected, played like a finely tuned instrument. This video peels back the psychological theater of emotional entrapment and forces you to confront the brutal truth. Some women don't want love, they want control. You've been taught that empathy is virtue, that vulnerability is strength. But in the wrong hands, these become weapons, used not to bond, but to bind. This is more than a heartbreak story. It's a psychological autopsy of manipulation. As you descend into this narrative, you'll confront the deep philosophical tension between identity and illusion, between shadow work and seduction, between who you are and who you're told to be. This isn't about bitterness. It's about awakening. This isn't cynicism, it's strategic individuation. In this video, you'll uncover how empathy is weaponized by manipulators, the illusion of emotional compatibility, shadow work versus emotional performance, the psychology of codependent control, how vulnerability becomes strategic bait, why emotional chaos is used to erase your identity, the slow destruction of your support system, the spiritual cost of denying your intuition. If this opened your eyes, it wasn't by accident. Like, share, and subscribe. Not just for content, but for clarity. The war is psychological, and awareness is your only weapon. Tags: Machiavellian relationships, toxic female archetypes, emotional manipulation in relationships, psychological warfare in dating. She doesn't love you. She studies you. Women you should never trust. Narcissistic female behavior, Machiavelli dating advice, betrayal in relationships, shadow work in love, philosophical betrayal, empath and narcissist dynamics, psychological entrapment, female manipulation tactics, emotional codependency, toxic relationship signs, emotional hostage dynamics, emotional vampires in dating, manipulative women exposed, dark feminine psychology, emotional self-defense, spiritual, awakening after betrayal, psychological mirror relationships, identity erosion in love, philosophy of trust and betrayal, emotional seduction strategies, weaponized vulnerability, strategic emotional abuse, how manipulators isolate you, female narcissist signs, images. She wore her wounds like jewelry, glittering just enough to seduce your empathy. You mistook manipulation for authenticity because her tears arrived on cue. Your compassion was her currency. She spent it recklessly, knowing you'd replenish it. She became your mirror, perfectly reflecting everything you wanted to see, until you disappeared. Each crisis she created coincided with your independence like clockwork. Her instability wasn't a flaw. It was a carefully tuned instrument of control. You poured real love into a hollow vessel dressed as vulnerability. Her silence wasn't mystery. It was strategy. You thought she needed healing. She needed a host. Every intimate confession became a seed in her arsenal of future sabotage. The warmth in her eyes was staged lighting for a psychological trap. She was never growing, only adapting her mask to your fantasies. She harvested your empathy like a crop, only to serve her next famine. Her crises were not chaos, they were calendar events. You weren't chosen. You were profiled. She weaponized the sacred and made a religion of your guilt. You gave her the map to your soul. She redrew it into a battlefield. Her dreams always lived in tomorrows that never arrived. She rehearsed pain the way an actor rehearses applause. You confused her mimicry for compatibility, and in that lie, you vanished. She didn't destroy your identity. She absorbed it. Her love was scaffolding around your crumbling boundaries. She didn't seduce you. She studied you. Every emotional explosion was a fire drill designed to keep you obedient. She spoke in apologies sculpted to control, not to connect. You were never in love. You were in a simulation of your own reflection. The more you healed her, the more she bled strategically. She never shared her shadows, only borrowed yours. Her chaos made you the architect of your own silence. She fed you stories seasoned in sympathy but starved of sincerity. You walked on eggshells that she shattered, just to prove you were clumsy. Her gaze wasn't affection, it was surveillance. She turned your integrity into a leash you never noticed tightening. You gave her sanctuary. She made it her hunting ground. She faked fragility to forge control. Her promises were just debts you would never collect. You didn't fall in love. You fell into her blueprint. Her charm was camouflage for conquest. She created emergencies like a playwright crafts scenes. Your kindness became her leverage, your silence her stage. Every red flag you ignored became thread in her noose. She transformed your instincts into instruments of your betrayal. You defended her to your grave while she built the shovel. Her intimacy was encryption. Never access, you became the ghost in her theater, haunting a role she never played. She wore virtue like a costume stitched from your ideals. Your loyalty was the bait, not the bond. You mistook your own echo for her soul. She killed your freedom by convincing you it was selfishness. What you called love was the illusion she constructed from your hunger to be seen.